Hello everyone. Finished this yesterday evening, Saturday. It's the sheriff's office from 4Ground. I wanted to give you a little tour of it and talk about it. It's quite a large model, but by no means the largest one that 4Ground do. Although it's the same apparent skill level as the hardware store that I've done already, I certainly found it a little bit more complex to put together, shall we say. So I've got a 28mm figure at the top of the steps there to give you an idea of the size of it, and it's on a piece of plywood which is a foot square, so that will give you some idea of how big a model it is. Yeah, there are a couple of pitfalls that you can fall into putting this together, and I avoided some but fell into others, and that's partly to do with my own stupidity, but I also think the instructions aren't brilliant. I'll show you some examples as we go through this, but fantastic model. I was quite chuffed with this yesterday evening, so I've spent the remainder of the evening celebrating by drinking whiskey and watching The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Luckily I managed to avoid the usual syndrome of going on the internet and making lots of rash purchases of further Wargames products. Checked this morning and don't appear to have done that, so that's good. But there is so much on, there's so many nice, as I said on the hardware store, the 4Ground just sort of go that extra mile in adding all these nice little finesses to it. Let's try and, I mean, one of the things I particularly like is that the hardware store came with a separate sheet of posters and signs and so on. In this particular model, they come on the back of the instructions, and I didn't want to cut those away, so I just used some of the ones I had left over from the hardware. Well, left over, I didn't use any of them on the hardware store, so you can see, I hope you can see, is that in focus? I'm not sure. Yeah, I may not be able to get it to focus because it wants to focus on the closer point of the model there. But as you go into the office door downstairs there's a notice board, and you have various options. There's quite a lot of choices that you can make with this model, which is partly why it can get a bit confusing on the instructions, because they obviously have to go with one option and then all the pictures from then on relate to that choice, so it doesn't necessarily correspond to the model as you're building it. But yeah, you can either have a wanted notice board, or you can have various sort of titles and captions on that. And you can make it either the county sheriff's office or the town sheriff's office. You have alternative signs here. There are some odd things, like it tells you not to glue this down onto the roof, but I don't see the point. A lot of it is, is separate, such as the boardwalks and so on. You leave unattached, but I don't see the point of not gluing that sign down to that roof. It tends to be a little bit heavy at the front, so because it's a sloping roof, it has a tendency to fall off anyway. Come out of the slots that are provided for it. So I glued it down, didn't see a problem with that. But yeah, there are a lot of things like these steps themselves are loose. Little things like that. Office is found to the side, so if little figures going up the steps thinking that the office is upstairs, they notice that straight away and go in around the side. Anyway, let's zoom out again and I'll show you around the inside. Yeah, actually, before I do that, before I get too involved on the inside, some of the things that I forgot to say with the hardware store is you really have to be patient. Don't sort of rush the stages with any of these models. Allow time for the glue to dry before you move on to the next step, and don't detach from the sprues any parts that you don't need at that particular moment, otherwise you'll get a complete muddle, because identifying the parts is quite important, and that's one of my criticisms of the instructions. I haven't got an example to show you now, but there are several misidentifications. I noticed a couple of obvious errors on the instructions where they'd put the wrong numbers on certain items. I mean, this is an example here. DR12 is a solid door, and I think DR there is meant to be DR1 and 2, which are the two parts of this sort of door jamb here that you glue together. But there are some that are worse than that. They've actually put the wrong lettering on. You can see there are some obvious mistakes, such as there where they've got, I don't know if you can see that, glue and clamp, but they've actually reversed the lettering. For some reason the pictures got reversed. So yeah, you have to be careful, and you have to make sure that you've identified correctly the parts. Don't trust the instructions entirely, so you have to be very careful. And I did manage to make one mistake that well, I've made several mistakes, but I'm definitely made one mistake that was the result of these instructions not being entirely perfect. And the other thing is, it does show you photographs holding things together with elastic bands like that, but it doesn't do that for the smaller. I would recommend having quite a lot of these smaller elastic bands as well, just to hold the smaller pieces together like this, as you're waiting for the glue to set, because things can slide and so on and just slip, and then when you come back to it, it's not easy, in fact virtually impossible to detach things. Right, now I will get on to, let's look from a little bit further up down onto the model. So the roof comes detached, and there's an upper floor. Not really much to mention. There's two rooms. There is a door, this solid door here, which I only noticed. There's no photograph or image or instruction to actually attach that there. but on the website there's a photograph, and it's actually, this is the only door that doesn't open and close. The door is just the rectangle shape, and there's no there are no slots or anything to put, or indeed any kind of protrusions to attach the door so that it swings open. But all the other doors on the model open and close, like that one. Yeah, so that's more or less all there is to say about the upper floor. But it gets interesting when you go down onto the ground floor. So this is the office as you come in. I've got a lot of scatter terrain and bits and pieces on order, hopefully arriving soon, and some of it is specific for a sheriff's office. So there's things like racks of rifles and a desk and so on, so I'll be able to furnish that. And then so this is the front entrance to the office here. You'll notice all the windows on the ground floor are barred, so there is a sort of blackened kind of wood, makes it look like metal, and the doors are barred as well in the same way. There are two cells there, and there's a rear door, solid, which is meant to be solid metal, and that gives you another access to this rear area so that you can bring prisoners in from the back. And in fact there is an additional model of a gallows set, so that would link up to this side, so a prisoner who's going to be hung can be taken out of this door here up onto the scaffold. Yeah, let's point out one of my first errors, which at this distance you can't tell, but it's there if you notice, is that there are 3 barred doors here, all of which look identical, but in fact 2 of them are labelled with one number and the third is labelled with another. And it's not as you might imagine that those 2 have the same number and that one has a different number. One of those is the different number, and this one here had fallen out of the sprue, so I didn't bother to check and I just put that there, and by the time I realised my error, the glue had dried on it. But in fact that one there is actually upside down, so there is a little diminutive keyhole, and it's above the kind of metal area there and upside down, but you barely notice it. But that is so that these doors, all I did was reverse one of these doors to correct that, but these doors they have the keyholes the right way up. The solution would have been, had I done those first, it would have been to turn that round so that it opened that way. Yeah, so that's, not a big problem. These areas here, you can opt to take those bits of MDF out and replace them with the kind of brick effect. So it's this sort of surface here, and it does tell you not to glue this area in here or this area here, to leave that detached. And I think the idea is that you then can simulate jailbreaks and things like that. But it's yet another loose piece that can fall off as you're transporting it, or you can lose it in storage and so on. So I wasn't bothered about that, so I glued it all in. But that's partly what I mean about when you're trying to correspond what you're actually building with the instructions, that they left all these pieces off, and it did occasionally cause me a problem. You do have to be careful. This piece here, this little piece of wood here, there's nothing. I found again an image that shows you that there, but there's no instructions to glue that there. I just did. Yeah, but the worst example I came across, and it was just ridiculous. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to find it now. Yeah, here we go. There are two pieces that shape which are RF11. Now, one of them goes in a very obvious place. It's the same width as the rooftop there, you can see. So there's the top of the roof, and you can see it's exactly that shape. And it goes in there. So there's a sign there, and it goes in across there and just holds that backing piece there up against the top of the roof. Now the other piece, it's absolutely crazy. Let's put this back on. But they tell you quite clearly, got to find it now. Yeah, there we are. They tell you quite clearly to glue it along that bottom edge there. Clamp it on. I mean, what is the point? You know, it doesn't have any decorative or practical purpose there at all. You know, yes, it might hide those two joints there, but then what about the ones on the other side? There's nothing to hide those. It's not, you know, it's not something that's particularly distracting or anything like that. And in fact, you know, the model on the website as well, I'll put a picture up and it shows it along there. Absolutely crazy. So it does really make you doubt yourself and the way you're putting the model together. You know, you have to make decisions about whether to include something or not, and that just seemed crazy. So there were two frames there, that one and that one, that are completely wasted, where they could have included further instructions that they actually omit. You know, that's a sort of complete waste of space. And one mistake that I did make is when you put these pieces together here for the this part here, the town sheriff's office sign and so on. It is vital that rather than having there are these pieces here, and there's a backing piece that comes in from the other side, and two of these frames that join together. But it is vital that instead of having it flush with the front edge, you have it flush with the rear. And you can see, I hope, that I haven't done that. And that is because you have to then attach this to the roof using a kind of pin there that goes through. And because there was a gap, I've only been able to glue that just with this bottom edge there, so it's vulnerable, you know, to being caught as you reach across for move figures or whatever, and to come off. So it's not, you know, it's not ideal. And what I did in the end was I had to sort of bodge it a little bit, and I've put in one of these additional bits that you get in excess there, so you can see a little corner there, just to have a sort of a greater area that I could glue it to. But so, you know, if you inspect it really carefully, you notice that little corner poking out there. So yeah, so that would be my advice: is take care as you're putting these things together. But yeah, really, as I say, it's really chuffed with this, and it's just a lovely little model to look at. So I'm not knocking it too much, but you know, it's more advice really to be careful. Oh yeah, and that is one other thing that I did find a criticism of it, is one of the pieces, the laser hadn't cut through. You know, so it was very hard to detach from the sprue, and had to use a steel ruler and a scalpel and carefully kind of carve it out. But it was the interior wall on this side of the building, and I can make it out now, but you probably wouldn't be able to with the camera. But there are some kind of rough edges on the inside of that window there, but that worked out all right now. So yeah, I'm going to start on the next building now, but they're getting larger as I go along now. So the next one's going to be a little bit more complex again, but really looking forward to doing it. So that's it. That's my review of this model. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Bye for now.